I,
Grass
I don't
Lapa.
see things anymore.
Okay, well that's a good name, Lapa. Nothing wrong with that name. Okay, so me and Copper here, guys, we're taking a look at the new Mythic Plus Season Affix. Season 3's affix is called Encrypted. And it says, enemies throughout the dungeon possess relics of the first one. Destroy the relics to summon the first one's Atoma and gather powerful bonuses based on the order in which they were destroyed. So that's a very interesting statement. Immediate thoughts, Cop, let me know.
It sounds really weird. It sounds kind of like very similar to the lieutenant system, but just weird. I don't know.
The thing that strikes me is it says based on the order in which they were destroyed. So at first I'm
Yeah.
kind of confused by that, but then we're going to take a look at what it actually looks like once we're inside the dungeon. Okay, so above you will see the 3-pack on the stairs there that nobody really ever aggroes has 3 things floating above it: Relic, Woo Relic, and Vire Relic. Yeah, immediately you can see a bunch of them all throughout the dungeon, and a couple of them are on packs that you probably don't normally pull. So that immediately makes me think they're trying to shake up the routes again, just like they did with Season 1 and Season 2. Hey, you can actually see they're like creating like a little bit of a shield on the targets. I'm not really sure if it's doing anything in combat, but it does look like they are actually attackable, and I assume that's what it means by the order in which they're killed. So I don't see, oh, they're attacking us. They're attackable, they're actually attacking us, and it looks like they're just gonna get cleaved down pretty severely. Okay, they're all dead. Oh, Vire, okay, so it's summoned an ad that is now casting shoot at us, has a gun. Big blue dude. And now what? Oh, 25% increased spell and ability cooldown rate, but it only lasts for what looked to be about 50 seconds. That's interesting. What do you think about that at first glance?
I'm just wondering if we're gonna be able to do it before every boss, or how often we can do it, or where in the dungeon. Is it in multiple places?
Well, as of right now, I can see at least 3. Actually, no, there's a 4th one over there, over by the Shard of healthiest to our far right. So let's go ahead and take a look at what maybe the combos are meant to look like. But that one, I don't really know what we killed. It just kind of all got AoE down.
Do we want to pick one specifically to focus on? Wonder maybe if you gripped one into us and we could just kill it quick that way.
Okay, so they actually have abilities too. You can see they only have 33k health compared to the pack that we're going to fight them in has 140k health. So this is obviously a 2. The only actual affix is tyrannical. Unlikely that fortified will impact it, but you never know. So we have the Woe Relic has defense matrix. The relic emanates a defense matrix, reducing damage taken by nearby allies for 15%. Then we have the Vi Relic that says the relic emanates an acceleration field, increasing the haste of nearby allies. And then we have Energy Barrage. The relic periodically unleashes a barrage of energy at all players, inflicting 1,438 damage. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and grip that Relic out, and we'll see if killing one first matters. Take a look at, we're just trying to kill this Relic as quick as possible. You can't actually grip it, it seems. Can't be stunned or gripped. Oh, but the other ones didn't even aggro, so that's curious.
Yeah, I think it is the first one because we've got a buff that tells us if we do the other 2 to complete the cipher.
Yes, defeat Vi and Woe Relics to complete the cipher, Encrypted cipher. So there you go. So it's whichever one that you want to kill first, it seems. Okay, now the ad is gonna spawn, and it's a little tank looking guy here, Dismantler, and he's got about 120k health. So again, not a lot of health, but he's got some abilities. He did deconstruct, force slam, looks like a thing that you can dodge. And we're gonna take him out and see what we get. And we just get another, we also got cloaked. Oh, look at this, we're shrouded.
Wow.
Oh my god. And 150% movement speed as well.
That is nice.
The shroud doesn't last very long, but the movement speed one is definitely the worst one if it wasn't for that. So that's very interesting. So based on where some of these are located, you could potentially be using these as a skip. That seems pretty creative from Blizzard's part. Kind of harkening back to Season 4 of BFA. You had the ability to basically skip anything in the dungeon. Now, of course, it's a very, very small stealth there, but we are stealth, so maybe it's still being considered for tuning. But yeah, realistically, that's a pretty cool concept there. So another big opportunity with this affix is placement, and where it can be can make a massive difference on the actual route that you're doing, especially if we're talking about pulling trash that you wouldn't normally pull. So you can already see out of the gate here in Plaguefall, one of the packs you would normally skip is active with the buff. But we were just talking about this main cop, it would make some of these skips a lot easier. So immediate first impression of the skip one, doesn't seem long enough. It's actually 45 seconds of 150% speed, which is frankly kind of pointless. I don't really see that being useful for almost anything at all. Maybe a boss fight here and there. But the actual shroud part has enormous potential. The problem I can see though, only 10 seconds. So if you're going to pull a pack and the next pack is, 1 or 2 seconds away with running, what are the odds that all 5 people get that buff and get to the other side of the pack within 10 seconds? It seems far too short. So my suggestion immediately might be just make both of them 30 seconds. A little bit more balance there. I don't really feel like anybody needs 45 seconds of 150% move speed, and maybe 30 seconds of invisibility sounds ridiculous, but obviously you're not going to stay invisible once you skip anything and start getting in combat again. And of course, really, are you ever going to be able to actually skip 30 seconds of something? So I think that seems a little balanced out of the gate, but let's go ahead and take a look at it. We'll go skip up there and see what's going on in the dungeon. So there's immediately some interesting opportunities here in Plaguefall. We actually see one that would normally be in the path that you would skip. And so I wonder if there's going to be any type of penalty for not pulling them. It seems like no out of the gate. Obviously, that was a big part of Season 1 and 2. And there's a lot in some weird spots here, and we'd normally skip that here. And there's also one to the right here as well. So it makes me wonder what happens if you get all of them. So I think we might give that a try. Huh? Let's try it. Okay, so we're going to run a little experiment. We have killed the Woe Cipher from that pack, and now we're going to go ahead and try to kill the other stuff here and see if it actually gives us the buff. Well, we didn't get a second buff from killing a different one in this pack, so it makes me think that either they haven't thought of this yet and it's not been adjusted, or you can actually mix and match them. I don't know if there would ever be a reason to do that. But before we do that, I'm noticing there is a lot of them in the dungeon. There is a real lot. So I want to find out what happens if you pull and kill multiple at the same time. And I'd also like to find out what the hell these ones are doing. These ones are in front of the boss. These are actually with the boss. They look like they're connected to the boss. So I wonder if that's intentionally there to give you a buff for the boss. When we were in Hall's Atonement, we obviously only saw the one boss, so we'll take a look through Plaguefall a little bit more, but I guess it's probably, what do you think? It's probably smarter to give it with the boss, or how do you feel about that?
Depends on which buff you're going to get, right? Like, if you're going to get a massive haste buff from one of them, that would be really useful, because it can change when you're lusting, right?
Okay, so we grabbed the relics from the previous pack, and we're going to combine them with this pack and see what happens here when we kill everything together. Presumably it's going to spawn 2 guys, but you never know. Maybe it'll give us some kind of combined buff. There's the first Woe Drifter there, and a second one spawned another Woe Drifter. So we have 2 Woe Drifters up right now. The part is we still have the Encrypted Woe Cipher buff. And there's the first application of the buff, and let's see what happens if we get a second stack maybe. Oh, we do! We get a second stack!
Oh, that is so good, because that's 40% haste.
40% haste. Let's go into boss with this.
Yep.
And now we get a third buff here, 100% movement speed, 150% movement speed as well. So yeah, they do stack. Very, very, very interesting potential there. That completely changes my thought process on this, because if you can stack them up and there's actually a high abundance of them, then that means we are definitely going to have a lot of potential to do some crazy things this season. So the question then, do you want to pull more than one? I mean, this is only a 2, obviously, but they don't really seem like they're doing anything. But the question is, the trash that they're associated with, is it dangerous enough to warrant you not doing it? Or is it not even beneficial to do it? On this case here, we have 2 mobs that are opposite side of this little bone thing, but these are often mobs that I might consider pulling together. There's definitely combination potential here. I think the bigger question though is, how is Blizzard going to decipher which one you kill first if you're killing 6 together instead of 3? Obviously the first one that you kill will count, but then will the second one that you kill count for the first buff cipher? Or will it give you a second buff, then counting for the next 4?
Yeah, I think the way it's got to work, it's like order of operations in math, right? It's got to work like the first one that you kill the second time, right? So if we kill first, then whatever and then the other one, the next one that we kill, first one that we kill twice is going to be the first one of the second one, if that makes any sense.
Not at all. It's interesting because, yeah, if you just killed 2 Vi's back to back, then what happens? Yeah, do you lose a buff, or do you just get a second buff that then allows you to kill the next 4? All right, so we're going to test this out. Let's try to kill 2 Vi's back to back and then kill the other 4 and see what actually happens. So we did not actually gain a second buff from killing that one. Makes me wonder if we're actually just going to miss out on one. Might be a little buggy, or maybe it's just going to recognize that we killed 2 and give us potentially 2 spawns regardless. Okay, we got a really big pull here, a bunch of floating cubes and circles. Let's see if we can't kill it down and see what happens. If it works properly, we should have 2 mobs spawn, but maybe it's bugged and we'll only get the 1. Yeah,
Only
looks like
one.
we only got the one, and we didn't even get a second buff either. I was thinking that maybe once we got the first buff expired, Fusion Beam, we would actually just then start the next buff. Oh yeah, no, that is actually what happened. We did kind of shoot ourselves in the foot there. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but naturally you'll want to try to prevent that from happening. So we're actually exploring the dungeon here, and we have one of these with the mini boss here, which would be very interesting because we could potentially use the plague borers to kill the ad when it spawns. But of course we still have the offset buff from the previous mistake we made, so this might actually complicate things. Yeah, it's dead already. So me and Cop have been exploring the dungeon, and we're noticing that there's about 8 on the way up here, and I'm counting this out. Like 8 sounds like a lot, and then we get into this room, and there's actually 4 sets just in this room in front of the boss. Now we've been messing around with it, we've killed a few, but there was one set here with this ambusher, one set on the right, and there was actually a very strange thing happening. You could still see remnants of it. There was actually 2 woe relics and 2 relics, but not 2 of the star relics. So very strange situation here. Oh, actually, maybe they're just right on top of each other. Yeah, I think they are. They're right on top of each other. So very strange. There's like 4 to 5 sets just in this room. So it immediately scatters the imagination on, can we just get all of them into the boss? What is the possibility there? What is the reality? Obviously, this is some of the hardest trash in the dungeon. So trying to pull all of it together is very unrealistic. But there has to be a way to execute this. I'm not necessarily thinking in that creativity right now, but I guarantee you some of the best players are definitely going to. You're going to see this fact that these buffs stack. You're going to see some very creative pulling, and I think this honestly might really shake up the meta. So overall, Cobb, how do you feel about this affix so far?
I like it. It seems like there's a lot that can be done just to be creative, right? Oh, there's a bunch over on the shelf over here too.
Oh my God, there's some back here too. Wow. In terms of its power, though, how do you feel?
I don't know. Like the haste is the one that keeps sticking in my head because I know how powerful that could be. That's one of the Windwalker, like the Windwalker Legendary does something very similar. It gives me haste whenever I proc my Celestial there. So I know that that's going to be huge, and I know that's where people are going to focus. Like stealth, fine, whatever, and movement speed, fine, whatever. But the haste is where I think people are going to be focused on, and I think that's going to be huge, especially if you can combine a bunch on a boss, because you can change when you're using your Bloodlust, you can change your pathing. Everything. This is big.
Yeah, my first inclination is that the haste is probably the best one. The cooldown reduction one doesn't really seem that powerful, but there's some classes where it's going to be extremely powerful for. And then, like I said, the movement speed one is effectively useless on pretty much every situation you can get it for, unless you actually make use of the stealth component. But if you start mixing and matching them, imagine a scenario where you have maybe 2 stacks of the haste one and 1 stack of the cooldown reduction one. That is going to be an insane DPS increase. And, you know, I don't know how difficult fighting multiple of these mobs is going to be at a time. I don't know how realistic it's going to be to actually pull these. I mean, granted, we're looking at something that seems absurd. Not only are there actually 5 sets in this room, but there's actually a 6th set right here. I guarantee you there has to be a way to isolate all this trash out of them and just pull them all at the same time. That is going to be so cool because they don't actually do any damage if the trash itself is not there. I just think that would look so cool. But I'll tell you, this affix out of the gate, it's not really that crazy, but when you start thinking about what you can actually do with an affix that's this common in the dungeon, it really starts scattering the imagination. But when it's this common in the dungeon, is it actually a benefit? You might actually be slowing down to the point that you're really not getting a lot of trust from this, because if you're fighting these mobs constantly and they're even remotely dangerous, it's really going to kill your time in the whole dungeon. I mean, if you fight 12 to 13 of these in the dungeon and they're not giving you a commensurate buff, or you're not making good use out of it, then you're really slowing it down. So we were talking about this too, about potentially skipping trash, and Cop's first inclination, which was also mine, was to say that, oh, you're going to completely change how you do the route. But there doesn't seem to be any detriment to not pulling them, and it doesn't seem like there's any reason to pull them if you don't immediately need the buff from them. Is a 20% haste buff good enough to fight a mob that doesn't give any count and might potentially be dangerous? As of right now, of course, I'm not 100% sure, but it does seem like a really interesting concept, scattering this affix around. Usually every seasonal affix we've had, there's a very limited amount of them. Ever since season 3 of BFA, everyone has been a buff and a detriment at the same time, and if you handle it well, it could make a big swing. So ever since they did that, there's usually only 4 or so of these mobs. Now, of course, coming off season 2 of Shadowlands, I do think that that was a very good affix, because not only was it interesting and powerful, but it gave you the buff for the entire dungeon. And I almost don't want to lose that, because that feels like a really nice thing for just regular level keystones where you're just trying to do better every time you enter. You're not doing anything crazy, and it's just really nice to get that Varuth buff or that Sogadon buff somewhat early in the key and know that it's going to help you for the rest of the dungeon. Now we're going back to something a little bit more similar to the Prideful buff here, because if you get this and wipe with it, or you do nothing with it for the next 45 seconds, yeah, it's a big issue. And I could easily, I mean, it depends on what the other affixes and how things might line up with that. You've yet to see anything like Sanguine or Bolstering or anything like that. It could cause a lot of issues, of course. You can't be pulling this whole room with Bolstering. On paper, we're swooning over it maybe because it's such a low level and the limitless possibilities are present, but I think on higher keys, it might be far more restricted and perhaps not really worth pulling a lot of times. Obviously, you're not going to be able to skip this whole room, but I'd be very interested to see. So any closing thoughts on that, Cop?
I was just thinking, you were talking about not being worth pulling, and the thing that occurs to me is once the keys start scaling up to the higher ones, there's going to be a break point where the health of these mobs is starting to get to a point where you can't pull it off. You're going to have to work around them instead of through them, and it's going to be kind of difficult. I can see that it not only is the buff really good, but the downside is scaling really well too. I could see it. Very interesting. I can't wait to see
one
how
of
they
the
do
things
this.
that's so similar in season 1, and it is in my head right now, is that in season 1 the prideful mobs were a really big buff, and they were really crucial, and if you used it well, it was huge. Obviously more powerful than any one buff here, but of course you're going to get these buffs a lot more frequently. The difference was with the pride mob, that was really, really dangerous. And if you ever did a key in season 1 on like 20 or higher, you knew that a lot of people were very hesitant to commit damage to them because they were waiting for the buff that came. So this is almost identical to this. It's very similar to Pride in that way, where you're going to get a mob that spawns, and then after you kill it, you're going to get a lot of damage. So if that mob is again very dangerous, like the Pride mobs in season 1, and it scales up with key level and it has a lot of extra health, then we're really getting into that situation there where we're not sure how valuable this actually is. But if it stays relatively balanced, a little bit more like season 2, where the mobs didn't really scale, they didn't really become that much more dangerous, and you were able to multi-pull on top of a lot of them, especially in certain situations and dungeons and affix sets, then this could be a really interesting affix.
For sure. I like it. I can't wait to see, like I said, I can't wait to see how it tunes. I can't wait to see how like the damage that these are doing scales up, and the health, all of that. This is going to be a very interesting season.
Yeah, it's almost really interesting, just the fact that there's so many of them in the dungeon. So I can't wait to see what happens with this effects. But thanks for watching, guys. We're going to be taking a look at the Tazavesh dungeons, and we'll also be taking a look at the locations in there. Usually with an affix like this, I try to go around and scout every location, but as you can see, it's going to be abundant. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.